Okay, let's start. This webinar is a Forest and Finance initiative. This is a coalition of 8 organizations. They have different focuses, but they all focus on improve forest and finance transparency and let the world know our opinions and positions and prevent forest deforestation. I am the China Dialogue editor, Yifan, and we are an environmental website. And we just edit and published an article about the database of FNF, and I was invited to host this webinar. FNF, are holding five online webinar around the globe. The reason is they just renewed their website. This is not only a website, but it's a facelift. It's not to make it more beautiful. This website is a very good open source database to help everyone to find relevant information of finance and deforestation, and to track the money flow and to know where we should focus on campaigning and advocacy. And in China, we have entering an area of carbon neutral. This and the biodiversity has drawn less attention than climate change. And this year, in Kunming, in China, China will host an important conference, and now this important event, which also pointed to the necessity and important and the significance of forest protection. This event is about the elephant has been transformed and transported out of their home and forest. And this is a big event that everybody is looking at what is going to happen. The issue of deforestation is so serious that we cannot see the whole picture from our own country. It's a global issue, and the financiers have played an important role, and their money can have deforestation impact in the forest far away from where they are. And the forest risk and commodity trade their connection is very important. Today, it's my pleasure to host this webinar, and let me give an introduction. And first, Profound Award from Profondo will give an introduction to the FNF new website and database and how to use it. And he will focus on how you can use this database to find the new financiers and their financing activities. And he will also introduce the audience to global financiers on how their policies are and how to evaluate their policies. And then he will also introduce their new report on Chinese bankers' investment on beef, soy, and pulp and paper and palm oil. Those commodities in Brazil, East and West Africa, and Southeast Africa, and how this investment affected the forest there. And he will give a case study to the audience. And then the audience will know how they can use the website to learn better about the advocacy and the campaign. And then Wenbo from China Paper Network will introduce and how the Chinese financiers has invested in paper and pulp industries in the world. Wenbo is a famous environmentalist, and he has involved in the work of Greenpeace and many other important environmental campaign and social campaign. And then Bei from Global Witness will also introduce their new report about this deforestation and the role the financiers has played in. And Wenbo's presentation and Bei's presentation will be 10 minutes each. And after all the presentation, we will have a brief Q&A section, and that will clarify what is not so clear during the presentation. At the end, so in the end, the presentation will be 1 hour, and the conversation interaction between audience and the panelists will be half an hour. And you are all welcome to raise your questions, and we will give you our answer as clear as possible. And we are also, this webinar is also interpreted by Chen Yu, and she has Chinese law and international law background. And she's also working, she has been working on this project, and she has reviewed the report of finance and forest and finance. So she will help us to understand this topic better by translating. Now let's welcome Ward. Ward, the floor is yours now. Thank you, Ifan, for your introduction. And it's my pleasure to be here and welcome all the audience. And it's so great that Ifan from China Dialogue is hosting this webinar. And I'm also happy that Bei and Wenbo are giving presentation for us. First, I will give you a brief introduction to the FNF initiative, the partners, and the histories. FNF initiative is a coalition of campaign and research organization of 8 organizations, 3 the Rainforest RAN is a big NGO in America and focusing on environmental protection and the rainforest and the local communities. The role of RAM and FNF is to promote international companies and financiers to improve their forest policies. And second funding organization is Talk Indonesia. Talk Indonesia is a local NGO in Indonesia focusing on protecting Indonesia's rainforest and the communities and indigenous people. And the third funding organization of FNA is Profundo. We're based in Amsterdam, and we're a research and consultant organization. And our client is NGOs and is big NGOs. Our clients include WWF, Greenpeace, and those big NGOs, and also we provide service to Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other EU governmental institutions. Last year, we expand our network, and Brazil is a median coalition in Brazil, and they're reporting on the environmental issues and environmental damage caused by the local companies and other companies in Brazil. And last year, Amazon Watch joined us, and they are similar to RAM. Amazon Watch is also aiming at protecting Amazon forest and the indigenous people. Last year, BankTrack also joined us. BankTrack is a Dutch NGO, and their goal is to they have targeting 40 banks to promote these international banks policy making and to reduce their environmental and social risks during their investment. Friend of Earth, Sahabat Alam Malaysia is a local NGO in Malaysia. They are also aiming at protecting Malaysia rainforest and the local communities. And recently, last month, the Friends of Earth, the US, has joined us. This is their organization is to improve this. Their goal is to promote banks to have better policies. Oh no, FNE US goal is more focused on the fund management companies, not banks. Our FNF initiative started in 2016. We have three. The purpose of the platform is threefold. We promote an open sources data set linking financier to companies connected to forest destruction and right violation. This is the open source database data sets about which financier financed which companies. The second is to shine a spotlight on the main banks and investors involved. We evaluate their policies. And the third one is through case study, we expose the illegal activities, and we will have 3 case studies today to expose the financed company, how they conduct, how their illegal activities affect the forest. Now, I will introduce our new website. This website has existed since 2016, and recently we have updated. It looks like this. Now we adjust this website to help everyone to do research and analyze the forest risk of financiers. The first, we analyze the trend of forest risk investments, which country get more money, and from which year, and from which bank invest more and which less. And the second, you can also identify which financiers invest in which companies. The third one is the financial institutions, how they deal with forest risk investment and policy evaluation. Now I'm going to go into details. First, we have this database, data analyze function. We have 10 screening choices. You can use this 10 to analyze. You can choose, for example, different banks. Then you can see different banks financing portfolio, and you can also find different, or you can choose Bank of China banks in China or Dutch banks, or you can also choose different regions where the forests are at risk. Or you can choose Indonesia, Latin American. After choosing one of these 10, you will see a chart. The chart looks like this. And underneath, you can see detailed data and numbers, and you can also download this data and do your own analysis. And you can make your own chart, own table. You can also share the data. Click this black button. Now we also have a quick scan choice. Sometimes you need to analyze data. You can use detailed function, very complicated function, but also you can use this quick scan. You can filter it and select what you want, and you have different color. This color represent different China forest risk commodities, for example, beef, soy, rubber, timber. And underneath, you can see investors, financiers, and their policy evaluation. And these are different risks, the result of different evaluation. And also you can compare different financiers. And here, for example, Brazil banks, and here is Dutch. You can also compare with a Dutch bank or Chinese bank. You can see here, and the Brazil bank doesn't invest in Southwest African, but in Latin America, it has a lot of investment. And Rabobank is a Dutch bank, has more in Southwest Africa, but in Latin America, Rabobank has less investment. In the Southeast Asia, you can compare these two banks like that. And under here, you can see the summary of the policy assessment, how much they invested, and from which country, and their the average score they got, and all the other scores for other indicators. And here we have this scores for the policy evaluation and assessment. You can choose different financiers, different banks. Here, the green line is the name of the financiers, and this one is the scores and their loan and the underwriting service, and from which country, and different commodities. Here, back here. On this page, you can select a bank. Then you will be directed to another page of this specific bank. For example, JP Morgan Chase. Here you can see 5 biggest clients of loans and underwriting, and the top 5 investments, bonds and shareholdings. The red point means high risk. How do we evaluate that? We go to their website, for example, spot, RSPO, and medium coverage or NGO reports. That's where what we use to get this evaluation. According to a report, recent 5 years, is there any negative reports about this bank? If there is, the financier should investigate more carefully before investing into these companies. And here we can have a summary of the policy assessment. You can see the scores. Here is to avoid this social impact. Here is the policy to avoid governance issue. Underneath, you see different kind of issues, environmental, social, governance, different risks, and different from different finance products. Later, we will go for more details. And this is only a summary. And here is a very detailed, assessment for every piece of policies. Here, for example, another example is the ICBC. This is the big bank from China. We can see they don't have policies. They don't have they did not publish their policies, so we cannot do. Now I'm gonna give you a brief introduction to our investors analyze. And on our website, there are also data about bonds, shareholding, underwriting services of different financiers. The end of this year, September of October, it will be updated. And during our work, we found there are 1.6 million investment has been put into beef, put into forest risk commodities, 30% pulp and paper, and 20% to beef, and 50% to soya. And here is investor analyze from this first quarter of this year. And this is investment into stock and bonds. Our data are from two big, from Rumber and Infinitive. We found that every time we found one bank is investing in a company, we will look at the percentage of the this projects of this company. What is forest risk? What is non-forest risk? For example, 50% of this company's operations are palm oil. Then we think half of the 1 million is forest risk. If the other half is not in forest risk commodity, then that we consider that non-risk. So then we will know how much is the forest risk investment to this company. We will also look at the percentage of this forest risk investment in different regions. Then we will analyze which region has more risk. In the end of March, the data from the end of March this year, we found more than $4 billion as bonds and stocks are in a forest risk commodity. More than half is palm oil, 20% is palm and paper, and 10% is beef, and 12% is rubber. And most of the investment are in Southeast Asia, more than 2/3, and a little bit to middle of West Africa. And the biggest investors are Malaysia, the biggest is Malaysia government investment bond foundation. And following that, there are other Malaysia investors, and those two are the pension in Indonesia, and also there are investment from Korea and Japan. That is, this government pension investment fund from Japan is also one of the biggest investor to forest risk commodities. Now, let's have a look. There is a big investor. These are the biggest investors in the world. I listed 4 of them. The first is Siemens Darby. The second one is Suzano. The third is Top Glove from Malaysia for rubber products. And also produce medical glove. So during this COVID-19, it has a lot of orders and productions. And the last is JBS, who produces beef. And this is the example I'm going to give more information. And this company, JBS stock, we are calculating what is percent is from Brazil, because those are the forest risk business. In America, there's no forest risk because they don't use the local cattle for their production. And now here, I'm going to give you some brief information about the policy environment. Before I go for details, I will first tell you what is forest risk. Basically, why we think the financiers has to have policies in place to deal with the forest risk. First, from the perspective of the financier itself, if they invest in a forest risk company, this company will is involved. This company will also have financial risks. For example, if this bank invests in a company, this company suddenly found it is violating rights of someone else, then there will be penalty from the government. Then the company will have financial loss, and it's also challenging for this company to pay back the loan to the financier. And from the financier's perspective, this is also a risk. If a company got penalty and fine from the government, the stock price will go down, and the financier will not be happy to invest in this company. And the forest risk can also be seen from another perspective. That is the risk to the environment and the social directly. For example, the deforestation, illegal logging, and the lack of respect for labor rights or social instability. So today, we think for their own interest and also for the environmental and social interests, financiers should avoid investing in forest. We should have policies in place to prevent forest risk. We will see, we always, but basically we judge from the public source, from their from these financiers. Sometimes they don't they don't publish their policies. But if it's only internal policies, how can your clients and the third party give your advice on your policies? We found out this staff in these financiers, they did not study environmental social risk or relative knowledges in their university. They only learn they're expert of finance, but not environmental and social issue. But the NGOs and like us, our expert is in environmental and social rights protection. So these expert opinions are valuable to the financiers to make their policies better to avoid environmental and social risk, and in the end, their financial risks. We have a set of principles for avoiding forest risk. We refer to most of the international organizations' minimum standards for avoiding forest risk, and we have also share our principles to other NGOs to help us to evaluate and to improve our principles. And we also send it to the financiers to see whether it is doable, practical, or feasible for these freelancers. So based on those works, we think our principles are useful and are matching the international principles. Now when we want to look at whether a financier has good policies, we will see whether those principles are integrated in the policies of the financier. If there is, we give them if there's none, principles, there's 0, they got. And if they have, but they allow exception, then they got 8.5. For example, the suppliers of the company does not have to meet the principle, then that is where the score should be cut low. Because if the supplier doesn't obey these principles, more and more the supply chain of the companies will have problem, but more and more companies do not want those kind of problem in their supply chain. So the suppliers of the company has to also meet the requirements. If there's no such a requirement, then 1.5 score is cut off. Now, if the company asks itself and their suppliers both reach meet the requirements, then they got the 10%. And then we will also have separate assessment for each policy. For example, for beef, for pulp and paper, palm oil, and rubber, and soil, and timber, we have different policies, separate policy assessment. If one company has requirement on beef, for example, but not on timber, for example, then we will have separate evaluation and tell them, yeah, you have good policy on beef, but not on soya or timber, and that's you need to adjust it and make improvement. For example, soya in Amazon area has caused big problem. Not only focus on the forest risk commodities, but also we do separate assessment on finance services. For example, many financiers have policies on underwriting or loan, but on other financial services, they don't have policy. So we will suggest them to make adjustment. How can we get the total score then? In the FNF database, we can find each commodities, finance, and investment amount, and then we'll got an average score. Why we do this? For example, a financier invests in a lot in beef. So they don't have policy on beef investment, but they have good policies on palm oil investment, but they don't actually invest a lot. So we think the beef investment should have better policies in place, because this beef is account for bigger part of investment. Now, this is the Japanese bank, Mitsubishi, and you can see here there's different environmental and social risks, and this bank has different policies. You can see, for example, the first one, company and supplier have to obey forest and ecosystem, zero deforestation policy. And here we see this Japanese bank has policies on palm oil, but they don't have a similar requirement for their suppliers. And then we found on beef and soy and pulp and paper, timber and rubber, they don't have any policies. So they got 0 score. Then we have a Chinese bank, ICBC. If the ICBC publish their scores, they might have better score, because now we don't have any information about their policy, so they got 0 score. Now here is the policy assessment scores for different banks. Here we have published 54 policy assessment on 54 banks and financiers. They're from China, Asian, Europe, America, and Brazil. We will, before publishing, they will have a chance to have a look at our report and the result of our assessment and give feedback. We think not many financiers use these chances. In Europe, we got response because they're used to this kind of communication with us. But in Asia and Latin America, they did not use this chance. We think they had the chance to let us better understand their policies. Sometimes maybe we misunderstand their policies and give them low score, but they did not communicate with us. They did not use this chance to communicate with us, to know our principles, and to let us know their policies, why we suggest them to adjust their policies. We think there's a better chance for them, for the financiers, but they should better use it. She should have used it. And now here we see the best 5 financial institutions. I did not adjust to make the Dutch bank as the first one. It is our result of assessment. We have better communication with the Dutch bank. So ABN AMRO get 7. The first 3 are the first 2 are Dutch banks. The second is from Norway. They got a good score. And the 6.5 are given to government pension fund global, that is from Norway. It has better policies on environment and social risk. And the last one is from America, and city groups. And we think there's still a lot of space for the banks to improve. Many of the financiers have low score. In September this year, we will publish an assessment of more than 800 financiers. The last 2 minutes I will use to tell you more about our case study on China's bank investment and its risk. And Ifan has mentioned that FNF publish our report on our website. We have English and Chinese version, and on China Dialogue, also we publish our articles as a summary of our report. We found the Bank of China, the Chinese banks till 2020, the investment on forest investment the investment is over 1.15 billion US dollar, and 30% on pulp and paper, and rubber, 20% to palm oil. And most of investment in Southeast Asia and in the middle, Central and West Africa is around 20%. The Chinese banks are the second financer for forest risk. The first is Brazil, and then Indonesia. These two regions, they have their own rainforests. China also has their own forest in Xishuangbanna, but it's smaller. And their biggest client of Chinese banks in Southeast Asia and West Africa, it's China Chemical Group. And there's also another two in Indonesia, is Gold Eagle Group, and we have analyzed the client's risk analysis through our analysis based on public media coverage and open information or source information from the website of these clients. Then from those information, we judge whether there is environmental and social problems and risks. We found, for example,
什么样的问题都有，他们有滥刊问题、用火问题。
For example, this company has all kinds of problems: human rights, social, environmental, and social problem, and illegal operation and corruption. And here, the Chinese. This Chinese group has also all problems, but we did not find enough information. So now here's our recommendations. First, we think we suggest the Chinese financiers should have clear policies to deal with these risks and publish this policy. And then during this policy making, they can refer to our principles. We also suggest them to enhance due diligence. And the third is, we think Chinese government has already some good policies, regulations, guidelines in place. For example, green credit guidance and regulations in other respects. But we think those policies should be followed by the Chinese financiers to follow their government's recommendations as guidance. And the second big point is to enhance communication. Chinese financiers do not keep regular contact with their clients, and they should better monitor their clients and also communicate better with NGOs and civil society. As I said, financiers, they are expert in finance, but not environment and social protection, or other knowledges to avoid other social problems. This is not their expertise, it's ours. So it's better they communicate with us, with civil society, then they can adjust their activities. And the last suggestion is to divest, to stop the financing. And thank you for your attention. And Ying Bei Ying from Global Witness will give us another presentation. Bei, is your speaker okay? Is your microphone okay? Would you like to be moved in the end? I'm fine. Okay, if you're fine, the floor is yours. Now we will not do the Q&A session here. All the audience, you're welcome to send your question through chat. Okay. I'm very happy. Thank you for inviting me. My presentation is our analyze based on the FNF database. First, what is Global Witness? Global Witness is an organization based in London. My team is focusing on deforestation and the finance. Last year, we published a series of reports focusing on American EU financiers. And this Monday, we published a new report based on forest and finance database. But the spotlight is on Chinese financiers, Chinese banks. Here you can see a scan, a code you can scan to read the full version of the report. But then now I'm gonna give you an introduction of this report. This report, the main finding of the report is similar to what first is China has been the main agribusiness finance in the world. And second, five commercial banks in China provided 45% of the investment. From the chart, you can see the percentage of the investment in different commodities. And now we did, as an NGO, actually, we did a very basic investigation. We are NGO. We are not a strong expertise in this kind of investigation, but we use what information we can have to analyze the investment from this into these companies, and then we see where the risks to environment and social area. And I have to say that the database is not really updated. The data we use is not so updated. So all audience are recommended to use the website for an updated database for your own research. And later on, I will give you more introduction to the beef and to the palm oil investment. From January 2013 to April 2020, we see China's state-owned commercial banks has invested 3.2 billion US dollar to the palm oil industry, and we look at the environment and social risks in this environment. As Ward just said, many major companies in this sector received big amount of investment. We will look at the risks we have observed and their supply chain, and is there association with deforestation and customary land rights violation, including the company itself and their supply chain, their suppliers. Those risks should be all integrated in the financiers' assessment. I see, and in our audience, there are experts of pump oil sector. Some are not so familiar with this commodity, and so I can tell you, pump oil is one of the most risky commodities. At this moment, the pump oil production has been expanded to other countries. Aside from the deforestation and environmental protection during the producing, there are also social problems. For example, land deploitation and the customary land rights violation. Due to the time limit, I won't go for details. We can discuss more during the Q&A section. So what is the relation between Chinese bank sector and the deforestation in Brazil? Brazil has a lot of forest with rich with very high priority value, and the main reason of the deforestation in Brazil is the production and soy and beef. The deforestation has also impact on the regional water cycle and the climate. China is now the biggest consumer of Brazil's soy and beef. So the degradation of the plantation condition also threatened China's food security. And we analyzed the Chinese 5 companies received money from Chinese bank sectors in the soy and beef production in Brazil. And 2 famous financial institutions in North Africa have stopped financing JBS because of the environmental and bribe risk. But now China still invests in that company. And the 5 companies I just mentioned in Brazil has received a lot of money from Chinese bank sector. And JBS is the biggest meat producer in the world, and Global Witnesses do other investigation and in this company. Last year, we had a report and which emphasized JBS and other meat producers damage to in the environment. We also assessed the risk of JBS and the risk of investing in this company. But in 2020, still this company received money from Chinese banks and financial institutions. So how Chinese bank sector should cope with deforestation forest? We want to highlight that actually China's most of the Chinese investment are from just a handful of Chinese banks. So China is in a good position to improve their regulation, because you only have to deal with a handful of banks. In our report, we also provide such recommendations for Chinese regulators. So the main the overarching Chinese law for this issue is China's commercial bank law. This law is now under revision, and we suggest we have the due diligence and the investigation for overseeing risk should also be integrated in this law, because this is an overarching legal governance design. It will be beneficial for the banking sector to enhance their environmental and social obligations. So we think it's very important for this law revision. This is my brief introduction. Your opinions are very much welcome. Please feel free to contact me and scan this code for the full article, and we can continue discussion. And thank you, Baby, for a presentation. Actually, more and more institutions are using FNF database to conduct their research. I'm editing an article from an international NGO using FNF database to analyze China's palm oil sector investment and risk. And they found out Chinese investment in pulp and paper industry and is lacking of sense of forest risk. But the regulators actually has stronger sense of the risk. The government can play an important role by enhancing their policies. So now let's welcome Wenbo to give us a presentation on the pulp and paper industry. And Wenbo is a very famous environmentalist, taking part in establishing the Beijing office of Greenpeace. And Wenbo is also active in a global a discussion conversation on this topic. So welcome, Wenbo. Thank you, Ward, for your very comprehensive introduction to the FNF. And thank you, Bebe, for your presentation on the palm oil investment. And I think in our audience also, there are many experts in this field. Aside from palm oil, pulp and paper industry is also where the risk exists.
Network 呢是环境执掌网络，是一个国际性的一个。
Environmental Paper Network is a very internationally oriented organization. From this picture, you can see the pulp and the pulp mill expanded all over the world. In a developed country, and also developing country like Brazil, they are all pulp mills over the globe, and it's driven by the capital. The richer people are, the more paper they use. Let's see, this is 8,000 years ago, the intact forest covered large tracts, but now only 1 out of 5 is intact. And we're still losing them. And this in 2010, we lose 11.9 million hectares, and that every 6 seconds we lose a football pitch area, the area similar to a football pitch in 6 seconds. And the paper industry changed this beautiful forest into this. And they just use the forest for the pulp and paper. And part of this primary forest are used directly for this production. And then we use this paper, for example, one-time use cup and other paper use. And the main impact of paper making are listed here. For example, forest destruction and industrial plantation, illegal logging, and human rights abuses, climate change, energy use, and the more water use. And EPN has shared a vision for the for this future paper and pulp and paper industry. We hope all the public should pay more attention to the pulp and paper industry. And more than 140 NGOs has joined us to share this vision. And the first is to use less paper and to use paper fairly. You can see from this picture that in developed country, North America, Europe, and the use of paper per person is higher. And the production of paper and the North American, European, and developed Asian countries, the production of paper is huge. And now, in the developing country, the numbers are increasing, instance of the pulp mill establishment, and in China also. In China, the biggest Jiulong company is the biggest paper maker. Before it has sourced the paper from America and then transport to China. In 2020, before 2020, it used timber to produce paper, more than 3 million tons in China. And in Malaysia, they recycle waste paper to do paper production. And this production is still increased. And in China, Jiulong company is expected to increase 5 million tons of paper production every year in Malaysia. In Malaysia, it's also increasing. And every time when the company expands, the investment is also increasing. China has forbidden importing waste paper from outside. So the companies are discovering what new materials they can use for paper production, for example, bamboo. And this experiment, although bamboo doesn't sound like timber, but the production technology is not so different from the traditional technology. So the pollution is actually also similar. And this expansion is backed up by the local financing, including financial groups, bank groups. And another example is ADP. ADP, through excellency, this company to merge, to buy another company, Bomita, in Canada. That is a big company, a paper making company. And after, through this merging, the capital from China, this financial registered in Singapore, but it's Chinese. Because if it buy a Canada company through a Chinese company, it might cause some problems or some argument that this is China's capital expansion. So they do it through a Singapore company. And everybody, it's clear it is clear that this is a Chinese capital expansion. And in China, China is also a big paper consumer. And before a developed country shipped waste paper to China, in Japan and Europe, there should be better recycling system locally, not to transport their waste paper to China. And the third is care for people. In the pulp mills, in pulp mill, there's a lot of deforestation of intact forests that also has impact on the human, a local community. Forests are essential for livelihood of local people, and the fourth is protect forest. We hope that the companies will source fiber responsibly to achieve environmental and social mission and follow the regulation. And forests are also essential for wildlife. More and more investment in rainforests caused timber destroyed. And you can see all the pictures. This is the forest that has been destroyed that affected climate also. And the GHG emission is the big problem. During the production, we recommended to avoid chlorine bleaching, to eliminate water and air pollution, and design products for efficiency. And forests have provided an important source for clean water, but pulp mills produces toxic air and water pollution and waste. That has big impact on the water source. And the seventh is governance. Those big companies, their finance capacity is very big, and they have big influence on the government. In those companies, local governments are actually behind these companies to provide services to these companies. And many of these forests are in the south, and some primary forest has turned into paper mill. And for example, in Russia, in China, in the south of China, also there are primary forests which have been turned to pulp mill. And a pulp mill is like a bomb. It will one day cause ecological problems and environmental problems. The investors can actually have a impact on this in years to come. Pulp mill impact, though we need more regulations on the investors. Paper plays an important role in civilization. It should not become a factor that contribute to the environmental destruction. In a U.S. university, we had conduct a research project financed with Chinese fund, and we have paid attention to all these issues. And about pulp and paper investment in Indonesia, which caused forest fires, deforestation, and indigenous communities' right violation, and the companies has also impact on the government. The government have become actually the protector of this negative impact of these activities, which has negative impact on the forest. And Chinese investors in Indonesia, pulp and paper, is huge. For example, the AIIB, they have their own environmental and social framework. And the recent 2021 ESF, and this year, 1st of October, all the projects will be bound by this ESF. So now the impact on local communities in Indonesia, the local NGOs have organized a lot of protests against those impacts. The protests also include those against the Chinese financiers, and there are also demonstrations. Sometimes there are also violence, conflict. Some of the activists for the local communities' rights has been killed. So what are our recommendations for a Chinese investment bank? First, these are our lists. For example, they should follow the Ecuador principles and also other principles from the UN, and also the red line. And for now, the investment in the banks who invested in Indonesia's paper production should improve their environmental and social performance, and to become the new companies which has attention to the environmental and social issue, but not instead to destroy them. Okay, thank you, Wimbo, for your presentation. Okay, now our presentations are here finished, and I see in our audience there are a lot of experts, and you're welcome to raise any of your questions. For example, you see this database, and very visible and very direct and simple, easy to use. Do you think it's helpful? Or what else do you need? What, for example, tools and database you wanted to have to help your work? If there's no questions so far, and I have a question for Ward. An open source database like yours, like FNS, to track deforestation and the relevant financing activities. Are there any similar database that's similar to yours? And what's your database role, and how is it different from others? Yes, there are something else similar, but there are different targeted audiences. FNF focusing on bank, others focus on banks. We are focused on the NGO and media. we think they can use our database to do their analysis and to improve the banks to promote the banks to improve their policies and performance and the illegal activities. Trace finance is different from ours. Ours is looking at the financed companies' operations, what percent belongs to the risk, forest risk. And I have another question. Forest and finance is facing NGOs and the public, and what made you different? What made your database different in this sense? We, for example, through a similar webinar like this, we invited in NGOs and media to take part in, and we do a media coverage to make us visible. We contact media and we issue our reports to analyze the risk of financiers and to with the hope that the media will help us to broadcast. Now, here on this screen you can find a hand up sign, and you can use that to raise your question or in the chat room. Now there is a question from Jia Yu Deng, and he said, hello, in this database, I can see, can I see the source report? The negative report about the bank. Do you have the original link? No, we don't put it on the link on the website, but in our database you can find it. If you have a question concerning a specific financial institutions, you can contact us, and then we will provide that original link to you. So your question is about the negative report about the bank. Yes, we have that link, but it's not available to the public yet. We will put it there when we update this website. There is another question. Can I see the investment of Chinese companies overseas in agribusiness from your website, and how Chinese banks are investing in these companies? Well, I think this is the main function of this website. You can find the information from this website. You can select which companies receive investment from Chinese banks and where are their business are. For example, in Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, there are most of companies are overseas, are foreign companies, not Chinese companies. Okay. If there are no other questions, I have a question for Beibei. Why you chose this database to conduct your research for your report? I have mentioned before our research were focused on other countries instead of China. Now, because China, the transparency is not so good. But from this database, we found even the previous version, we can find some information about Chinese financiers, so that we can use in our research. And in addition, our investigation and research are for the regulators to have a better insight. For example, in EU, we provide our insights to the regulators for them to improve their policy making. In EU and the UK, for big amount commodity, there is already a legislation concerning the relevant issues that we mentioned here. So we hope to provide a new insight for Chinese regulators as well. Our dear audience, do you have any questions that related to your own work?
如果没有的话，我再想问一个问题。对，因为现在是，比如说碳中和让那个。
Now I have another question. The carbon neutralization has been is a global issue and has drawn ESG. The concept of GSD is getting hot. And so it's not only an environmental topic, but also a commercial topic. So this open source database, will it be, what kind of role it will play in the Chinese companies' information disclosure? I think for banks and financial institutions, they can see which companies are of high risks from our database. This open source database in China has also a CDP branch. They very often report how much water the companies are using and what's their GHG emission. Recently, we have heard from some financiers that they're using our database. They're looking at which banks are investing in high-risk company. Then when they have meeting next time with bankers, they will talk with these banks, say, oh, we see you have some problem with this side, this and that, so we can have a talk. Baby,
我们就是 NGO 所做的工作是提供一个信息。
Sorry, the connection is not so good. And our job is to provide information and also to provide a vision. The organizations can jointly publish information, maybe not from real expert side perspective. We are not the due diligence expert like the bank, those people in the bank, but the regulators can provide macro perspective to this issue. Besides environment, financial and legal risks, environmental risks is part of the more comprehensive assessment. So the due diligence aspect of this risk is also important. Okay, China actually has been moving forward in this way. Not too long ago, China has a reform proposal concerning the information disclosure requirement for companies, including financiers. And also we have SFDR, which is about that is from EU. That requires the companies to disclose information. This information actually can be related to Chinese companies sometimes. Now here we have a question. Wan Jian, he asks, except the public information, is there any mechanism or organization to monitor and evaluate financier continuous monitoring finance institutions. And China regulators, the CRBC, should be the institutions, the organization that keep continuous monitoring on these banks, but they don't focus on the environmental issue, even though they have in their regulation, there are some provisions about environmental issue, but not their focus. And Wang Jian, do you have a follow-up question? If you have, you can put it in a chat room, or you can raise your hand. Okay, there's another question. Is there any legal regulation or provisions in China that can about banks' environmental obligations that can push them to be more proactively consider environmental evaluation of their investment? Well, I'm not an expert of the law, but we had a law mapping. We found the revised environmental protection law has provisions and requirements for the companies to raise their sense of environmental protection, and there are also some obligations for them for environmental protection. In our report, we also mentioned some policies and regulations about environmental protection that requires the companies have to support the environmental protection in the sense of law, and the financiers, there is a lack of regulations. That is why we see this is a chance or possibility for these regulators to clarify more in this sense. And dear audience, you have heard about in 2018, there's a Green Home. This is a Chinese NGO. It filed a case against a polluting company, and also against the two banks who given money to this company. This case is not closed yet, it's still in processing, but we think this is a good start in China of public legal suit again concerning environmental issues. So that you are welcome to keep an eye on it and keep thinking of this. Okay, there is an audience, Lai Yun. I might have met this audience. Forest and Finance, do you have also a Chinese version? And for the Chinese banks to use, have some banks contact you to remove some negative information about them? Yes, we are thinking of the Chinese version. Now we have Portugal, have the versions in Portugal, Japanese, and French, and it's our plan to have a Chinese version. Yes, there are banks who contact us, but they contact us to just want more information about our database and how do we do this evaluation, and not ask us to remove the negative information about them. But there are medium contact us to remove. No, the medium contact us to know is there negative report about any companies, and then they can follow up. And Wang Jian, as a follow-up question, he asked, is there an organization that every year is monitoring and evaluate the implementation of the deforestation, forest policy, about this implementation. About deforestation, the bank is not directly involved in the deforestation, it's indirect through finance. We have heard some deforestation activities, and the banks are behind. So they're hiding behind this deforesting company. So this is an impact, indirect impact. So this is not easy for most of people to find out. So which banks and insurance companies have been investing in these companies is not public information. So Watts report and Global Witness report and NGOs report, they are linking banks and deforestation. That is important work of them. Let the public know the banks behind. Yes, the deforestation policies, China does not have a clear policy focusing on deforestation. Regarding the supply chain of forest risk commodity, there are policies on timber, rubber and pulp oil. But for banks, there's no clear policies. There are environmental and social requirements on banks, but the implementation and monitoring, according to the green credit guidelines, there are requirements of monitoring, but perhaps because we don't have close contact with the CBRC, so we don't have sufficient enough information to answer your question yet. Okay, thank you, Bebe. Are there any questions? Actually, our time is, we're running out of time. It's already 7 minutes. So as any speakers wanted to communicate with the audience, and you have anything to add to?
我是希望大家就是更多的中国非政府组织和
I hope that more Chinese NGOs and media get interested in our database and our policy evaluation. We think that inside China, there are some NGOs started communicating with the central bank and the regulators. That is very helpful for these bankers and companies to avoid environmental damage. From Netherlands and America, we cannot have direct contact with the financial institutions, and so we hope that the Chinese friends will help us. So yes, local NGOs in China can use this database to unveil this stories and find out the banks behind. So there's a question that if we focused on the financial sectors and deforestation, will it actually make the attention on the company's deforestation even less? No, we don't think so. We think, as Wimbo said, the financiers are indirectly damaging the forest, and these companies, the penalty on these companies will also affect the financiers, and the financiers are investing in many companies. So if there are similar requirements on many companies, that is different than requirements for a single company and individual companies. We make this database. We wanna through the small part of the institutions to work on more companies, to influence if we can influence these financial institutions, that will also change the behavior of the companies themselves. Are there any questions? If there's no question, I think we're done for today. As a guest host, I again thank Ward for inviting me, and you make this database